Welcome back everyone to my channel. Today I really want to talk about the programs that I use for architecture, for design studio, because for some reason this was a quite requested video on my channel. I decided to show you a little bit what kind of programs, softwares I use. I get through my design studio. Let's get started right away, I guess. It really depends also what kind of studio it is. Is it normal architecture, like traditional architecture, or is it more like urbanism or landscape architecture? So dependent on which kind of studio you have or you chose, the programs you will use are also different. And for the record, because I spent my whole last year with landscape and urbanism, it's gonna be a bit more related to this kind of design. So one of the first programs that I use when I start with my design is Illustrator. And that's because when I have some kind of map or a screenshot of something that I just need to analyze, like many times you have to first start analyzing things. Also, if you wanna draw something that is more organical in a sense, not like a section of a building, but more like I said, in landscape or urbanism, you have different, maybe you have the map of inundation on such things. And in my opinion, Illustrator is much easier to work with because it's very easy to use the pen tool to do more like rounded shapes and not only squares, like for example in Archicad that I use usually for architecture, which I will show you later as well. So here you see, for example, a kind of map that I did for my last semester where I basically just had to analyze what kind of different typologies and morphologies are in this area of the campus that we looked at. So as you see here, you have a really like a shape of a forest, which would be much more annoying to do in Archicad. That's why I do that in here. Also the colors palette and everything, it's very easy to do it in Illustrator. I think if you use a pen tool, it really needs some time to get used to it, but if you like get to know how it works with this kind of hold into this kind of rounded shapes, it's pretty fast to do anything with this. So that's why I chose I often choose Illustrator over Archicad in the first stages of like doing this kind of analyzing things. And also, what is super cool is that you can really export it into DWG. As you see here, you can just do like a DWG or a DXF. Here it calls Autodesk, but it doesn't really matter which kind of vector-based CAD program you use. These two will always work. And it is super nice because Illustrator is already vector-based, so it just converts it to a different kind. So if I just want to import it into Archicad, I can do it very easily. To be noted is only that this kind of fills and such, that's sometimes a bit more difficult to convert, and many times it doesn't really work, so you have to adapt the kind of fills like this in the CAD. But generally, I think this is one of the really useful things with Illustrator, that you can just convert it. Or if you just feel like, okay, this is the finished drawing, I'm just gonna put it like this. This was just the finished drawing for this specific analysis of this part. So it really depends what you want to do, but there is always a possibility to export it to Autodesk, Archicad, or Vectorworks. Another super useful thing is that if I take my iPad, you can really do very nice things because you have the pen in your hand, which is more intuitive, right? Like it's more like drawing. And in that sense, so if you have your iPad and a pen, you really can go to Illustrator and do more or less the same things. And for example, for one part of my design studio, I had to draw some kind of sections and trees because it was more like about this kind of things. So it's just much easier to do it with the pen like it was a paper and not doing it on a computer. It really depends how you work and how you like to work. So there are some people that don't care about doing it with the mouse, but for me it's just much easier to do it with my hand. So you see that you can do very specific, you can really do things that are more similar to like the real nature and not really like, you know, just squared or something. So yeah, this is all that I did with the iPad with my pen, and you see that these kind of things would be super annoying to do with the mouse. So yeah, this was super helpful in that moment to do that. This is also something that I really enjoy doing with Illustrator on the iPad. And if you have the whole Adobe subscription, you also get it for free on your iPad, so there's no like additional charge with this in a sense. So yeah, you're always free to go. Another really useful tool if you work with bigger scales in like nature and urbanism and things that are not only concentrated on one building. It doesn't really matter which kind of architecture you do, you really need the soil and the water and such things. So what is the best thing to do is to go to an open source website where you can get all the data, like the GIS data. And there are different websites, and I always use the ones from ETH, but there are always like many different kinds of, and actually every country has their own GIS platform, so you can always go there. And for example, for one kind of canton in Switzerland, you can just go there and you have different kinds of geo information and maps and things like this, which you can then download and process in a program that I'm about to tell you about right now. So this one is called QGIS, and this is just a program that many people, including like landscape architects and gardeners and like civil engineers, use to process like geodata. So what you can do here is, when it starts up, so what you can do here is, when you get, it's a free program, and when you get the data from your GIS portal, if it's, I don't know, like the topography, or maybe you have some kinds of, I want to know which streets are where, you can, everything you can download up here and then use it in this program. So when you put it in here, for example, if you have a part of the region that you want to look at, and you can export from the GIS portal, you can export different kinds of information. For example, this one is about the altitude. So you see with the colors that you have different altitudes. This is obviously a river that is more down, and you will get different heights also. So from this, for example, you can generate like topography lines and things like this. You also can use QGIS to generate point clouds, so you can generate like a 3D topography, which is a different topic, but this is something that you can also export to different programs like Rhino, Grasshopper, things like this, so you can have like a 3D generated model that you can use for your project. But basically this is just doing when you do raster it, you can really just get the contours of this, and and then you will just put in, for example, 2 meters and then run it. So you will get your topography lines, which you can use for your plans and things like this, because you can also just save this as a DWG, export it to Archicad, and put everything together. So this is another very useful program if you work with topography and things like that. So these are the like 2 programs that I showed you right now that I really use to like start the project. That is not really like doing the project in a sense, like it's not where I process my main drawings for the final result. I was telling you already about this CAD programs. And obviously if you click on this video, you are probably using CAD programs. But so this is like, there are several different uses or several different softwares that you can use. I mostly use Archicad because this is like the basic program that we use in Switzerland. Some people also use Vectorworks, but yeah, because most things are like Mac based, we don't really use Revit or Autodesk and things like this, but it's also possible to use it. But here, most people that I know studying, as me included, we all use Archicad at ETH. So this is a program that we use to just like generate all the drawings and do like sections, 3D models. It depends really what kind of work it is. Sometimes it's really advisable to start with a 3D model and just do like the section like automatically from the generation. If you have a 3D model, then you can really just do sections and you don't have to do anything and adjust things like sun and shading and then export it to rendering and things like that. How I work though is more like traditional, more like old school in a sense, because I almost do all the drawings originally as they are, like the section I'm doing my section on my own. It really depends also what it is. Sometimes if you have like a very big scale of a thing, for example like landscape architecture, your model is maybe not so as precise as it should be, then I think it's much more easier for me to just like do the section on my own. And also like with more conceptual drawings, it's difficult to do like a 3D model. So if you do like a conceptual drawing of a system, of a concept, then everything that I do is mostly like on Archicad. Even though sometimes it's maybe in like axonometry or things like this, it's all possible to do in Archicad. Although I think sometimes it's easier to do it in Vectorworks. Archicad doesn't have all the functions that I use, and sometimes there's really needed to do like going on and off from Archicad to Illustrator to do some things, because not everything is possible in Archicad. That's why I always use both programs if I need to adjust something. I will show you some things that you can do with that. So yeah, right now we are in Archicad and I'm just gonna show you quickly what we can do with that. But yeah, just like basic CAD program that you can use for, as I said, doing 3D models in a 3D section. You can use it either to do the 3D model if you feel like that is the thing you want to do, which you find up here if you do the 3D thing, or you can just also use different kinds of sections, elevations. This is something that will be generated automatically if you use it with a 3D model. But if you just use it normally, you can just use it like worksheets and then just draw on it. And this is something that I drew last semester for my urbanism class. And you see that, okay, this is not a model, it could have been one, but in a sense it just line drawings with hatches on it. So it really depends what kind of work you want to do, but for me most of the times this kind of thing is easier to do than doing the 3D model, especially if it's huge like this, almost a whole campus, and it has to be detailed. So yeah, this is just a kind of work you can do with that. You can also do more like axonometric things, you can do different kind of things. Also conceptual drawings if you feel like this is the thing that you have to do for your class. Yeah, but this is probably the time where I spend the most time at, like, you know, in the night and things like this. So this is like the most basic CAD program that we use at GETH and elsewhere. Things you have, how can you draw it, how to like, there are a lot of things that you just have to, like, for example, color palette that you use for the whole drawing, so you can just get how it works with the layers, and there are different kinds of how you can work with that. And I haven't done my internship yet, but I guess this is something that you really learn through doing. It's not something that you can just, you know, like learn in a book or something. Over the years, right now like 3 years that has gone by, I've been learning new things all the time, like in exchange with other students, in exchange with maybe also assistance, like, hey, how do you do that? How can you display it or like create it like I want to do, or how I want it to look like. And also, of course, like open source YouTube or whatever platforms that exist there for this kind of things. So this is really like an ongoing learning process with also new updates and new possibilities how to work, for example, also with the BIM, or how to work in a team with other, if you work in a group. But I have to say that Archicad is not really the best thing for working in a group, so yeah, not my preferred way of working with other people on Archicad. But yeah, this is just like an example of how it could look like with different kind of hatches, colors and stuff like this. And you also see I imported here my the topography that I used in QGIS. So this is really, everything comes together in Archicad more or less. Here we go to the next program that is very, very important, Photoshop. And because it doesn't really matter if you work with renderings or if you work with like normal like collages in a sense. So it doesn't really matter if you work with renderings that you put into 3D, and you can also do it in Blender, for example. This is not something that I do, but I know this is a thing. Or you can do it in Grasshopper or Rhino, just render things, or with Twinmotion. There are several platforms that you can render your 3D models. But if you work more like this traditional way, in a sense, when you do like a collage from pictures, from maybe just a drawing, a PDF that you have, and just lay over your different kinds of materials, which you can also do. There's not a really right or wrong in a sense, but generally like the Photoshop is super important to display just like the ideas or visions that you have. So there are really like several ways how you can do that. And the two ways that I do it most of the times is I take a 3D model or just a perspective, a view of something, like I had here in the background. This was just a perspective, and I just did like this kind of illustration kind of thing with layers, with different materials and stuff like that. So this is one way how you can do that. But a different kind of way is to, like, you can also draw, like paint on it on Photoshop. But the other thing that I also really like to do is to just take a picture that I took with my camera and just edit it as, you know, like if you have a transformation going on or something that is from scratch. Because I think 3D models are super, super good if you have something that, you know, like you build from scratch, that you don't have anything to, like, you know, to photograph. But if you work with the existent buildings or existent environments, it's super nice if you really include this kind of structure in your collages. So that's why I really like to use this kind of thing and just add the stuff that I think should be in this space, should be changed. So I think this is really like just a different kind of working with existing things and working with Photoshop. And there is not a right or wrong. It just really depends on what is also like the goal of what you want to show. And for me, most of the times I really prefer to have this kind of not ideal kind of rendering, just more like a collage, more something that kind of things. But it really depends on the job you have or the design studio that you have. So yeah, this is also a program that I spend a lot of time in. There are so many things that you can do in Photoshop. It's more about like a different kind of video. But yeah, working with layers and working with all this stuff is, yeah, it's something that you have to learn as well. But very, very important, because collages are the way how we portray visions in architecture. It's not only about the construction and things like that. It's more also about how we envision the whole process and how we envision people living in these spaces. For the final point, the final step also when doing a project, it's obviously Adobe InDesign. So everything that we do, we put into Adobe InDesign so we can have a nice layout. And it doesn't really matter if it's a presentation or if it's the plot. InDesign is the most useful tool, I think, because you can really just as you see here, for example, it's not it's a bit out of date right now, but this would be the thing, for example, how you can do a layout. So you put everything that you put together over the semester with your final results onto like one big paper, like A2 or A0, so you can plot it. And the easiest way to do it is in InDesign. And even though sometimes it's super slow, but generally if you put your, so yeah, this is just the thing, the way how you lay out everything. And this is something that takes a lot of time, and to be honest, it's not something that we can do like in 2 hours. So it's something that you have to like calculate enough time for before you have to print it, because sometimes there are also like things that doesn't work, or like it's super slow like right now, or you know, like you just realize, okay, while printing it's not as I wanted it to be. So these are just the programs that really have to work together. And there's not a one solution how to use programs for architecture or design. It just like, it really depends on how you work, but there are like several like the steps that we just looked at you kind of have to do with the layout, with the Photoshop, with things like that. But it also really depends on what your professor expects of you and how you are working as well, because it really depends, like every person is also different. And I guess every other person would say I'm using it totally differently. Yeah, and with the time you also learn new things, like new programs. My goal is really to learn more about like the 3D programs and things like that, more like renderings, because I feel that right now it wasn't really the main focus in our studios. This way how I worked until now, and yeah, I'll see how it will work like in 2 years. It probably will change a bit. I hope you found some value in this video, and if you have any questions or comments about how do you use, or I would be really interested on which programs you use, maybe there's something that I can learn from that as well, just write into the comments section. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. So I hope I will see you next week. Bye guys.